Let's see. All right. So this is my teacher interview for EDU 6000. This is the lovely Paula Jones. And Paula, can you tell us what you teach?
I teach fourth grade at the Cambridge School, and I also teach science as one of the specialties.
Awesome. And how long have you been teaching?
Well, I've taught fourth grade for 14 years, and I've taught at the Cambridge School for 7.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will get right into the meat of it. Oh no, oh my PDF is okay. All right, there we go. So here's an easy low baller question. What are some of your favorite attention getters in class when you need to refocus the class after something, some just favorite ones?
So it's, if we are transitioning, I make sure that I tell them, so if we're transitioning from one subject to another, I tell them, okay, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to do this, which I think is a real, it's a way of getting their attention and letting them have a breath before they have to put things away. And so they know what we're going to do next. So by giving them that heads up, this is something where in a moment, I'm going to ask you to put your binders away. So it tells them, okay, we're going to make a change, but also it allows them to not feel that abrupt, oh, okay, we're going to do this. It lets them process it. And those that maybe process a little bit slower, it is not so jarring. So we're in a moment, I'm going to ask you to do this. Now, if the class is a little bit, if they're loud in that we have just finished a really fun sort of experiment, or if they've been working on their own or working with a partner where they've been allowed to talk, so the volume is higher, I will say attention, and they say, yes, ma'am. And so that is just a kind of a typical response to get their attention. And they know that yes, ma'am is followed by silence. And that they're listening. So they're waiting for instructions on that. And I feel like I have to use that quite a bit in science because we do so much hands-on lab work that it is, if I need to interject something and I have to interrupt them, then I'll use the attention. And that's something that they learn in the lower grades and that I inherited, which is really nice. That discipline, that habit building is instilled in the lower grades. And so I get to reap the benefits from it.
Don't have to start from scratch.
I don't. In years past, where the school that I came from was had much more emphasis on music. And the music teacher would use an attention getting device, and she would say, shh, shh, and they would have to answer with shh, shh. So in my early years of teaching, that was something that we would do. And that was effective, but again, that was started in the lower grades, so I could still use it when they got up into the upper elementary. But we don't have that precedent set at the Cambridge School, so I pretty much stick with the attention.
Okay, so it was from music, but you used it in every subject.
I used it across the board, and I think we all did. So, and it's because that music teacher started that, and she had worked with them in the lower grades, like kindergarten, first grade, that it was just, it was a standard way of getting their attention. Now, awesome. I'd like to try a different one that is humorous, but I think that it would fit my time period, which is the Middle Ages. And I would like to say fourth grade, and they answer, yes, Your Majesty. But I think that might be a hard sell, but I think it would boost my ego.
That would be great for you.
It would.
That's great. Well, I love that. That bridges me into my next question with the integration is you teach all of the subjects in fourth, or most of the subjects.
Yeah, I teach all the humanities
and
science. So I don't do science, I don't do art, I don't do music.
Yes. but I understand that, and I know at Cambridge we're really good about this, but could you talk a little bit about how subjects are kind of integrated with each other? How it's not strictly like we're only thinking about science. It's no, we apply it to a lot of different things. Can you touch on that?
I can. So within math is one that comes to mind when I was looking at your questions. That we cover the Middle Ages in fourth grade, so we do the medieval period, and we begin that with a look at that the tribes that are coming in from the north and basically coming in to parts of Europe and settling in Europe, and have been given the name barbarians. So the barbarians are coming into Europe and into England, and they are bringing with them a way of communication. And that way of communication, it involves different forms of measurement. And so the Vikings were bringing in things that are tools that they would measure things with. And so the class when we're doing that time period, the math teacher will bring in that way of measurement that the Vikings would be, and it's real hard to measure things. So that is where you've got history and you've got math coming together. The composition and literature is an easy marriage between those subjects. So we've got within the Middle Ages, we're reading about a boy who is experiencing life in the time of the plague, and at the same time we're reading the historical account that's happening with the plague in Europe and its effects on society. So they're reading about it in literature, and we're studying it in history, and then we're going to write about it as well. So we're going to take it from a first person point of view. We're going to take it from a third person point of view. So there's a beautiful weaving of literature and composition and history, which is very intentional. It's not happenstance at all.
Right. It's not just coincidence.
Not at all.
Okay. Awesome. That I love that. It's always really fun to hear what the kids are doing. I get to see all the projects, so I'm like, ooh, I'm so jealous of when you guys have a time period that you guys focus on. Kindergarten doesn't do that, so
No, it is. It's and I have to say, fourth grade is the best. From everything from Viking Day, where they're living it, to when we go into Monastery Day, where they're monks and they're creating illuminated manuscripts that they had just learned about with the Book of Kells, and so it's just there. And then we move into the medieval fair and all the preparations with that. So they're learning about the characters, and then they have to become those characters and write about them and give a first person speech with that. So yeah,
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love seeing it. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about with like how we actually teach things, there's something I read about in my class called progressive formalization. And the best way to explain it is like kids have these informal ideas or informal things that they can do and ways of thinking about them. And teachers look at that and take that and go, okay, let's slowly like solidify these into real parts of the curriculum. And the example I came up with was like what are they called? They're these oh, I don't know if you can see. Hang on. There's I'm struggling with they're these guys in the math, and I'm blanking on the name now. I did a whole section on them, but like where it's the whole number and then
the number groups.
The number group. Where it's like, okay, it's informal because we're not using the language of this is addition and subtraction, but then progressively we get there. I don't know. Do you guys do anything like that in fourth grade where it's like?
Yeah, I think that we do. We don't. It's more pedagogical than it is. It's like how we teach it, and I don't know that it's formal. So I'd like to. Ours is not a formal thing, but we do a lot of discussion and using the students' language to introduce a new concept. I like to think of it as where I'm using their language and their observations to lead them to whatever it is that I'm going to teach them. So when we, for instance, we started with feudalism, and I know where I want them to get, because this is the scope and the sequence of what the lesson is, but they're leading, I'm leading them, but they're feeding my discussion with observations and comments, but I feel like sometimes they're adding things in, but I'm still leading the train. I'm still driving the car. And so I feel like that is an approach, even at the 4th grade. And I know it happens in the upper school. The students are coming up with the discussion, but there's that backbone, or that underlying whatever that is, roadmap for it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's awesome.
I don't know if that's what you were getting at, but
no, kind of, because I have other questions on here where it's like, hey, like, how do we integrate students' prior knowledge to then build off of that with the lessons and where we want to get them to?
Right. And that's one of the beauties of how our curriculum is set up, as far as in the classical format, is we're starting in ancient civilization, and then move chronologically through history until we get to the modern age, and then they recycle that again in the middle, in the upper school. So my husband teaches 10th grade, and a lot of other things, but he teaches history, and our curriculums match. Only he's doing it at a 10th grade level, and I'm doing it at a 4th grade level. I think it's the 9th graders and the 4th graders, because we recycle the time period. Now he's talking about King John at a 9th grade level, like a 15-year-old. I'm talking about the Magna Carta and King John at a 4th grade level. But the fact that I have laid that foundation, that they know who King John is in the Magna Carta. So it really is beautiful in that what we are doing in the lower school gets revisited at their age level. So I think it's just that reinforcement, so that I'm giving them the vocabulary, and he gets to build then on the theory and the higher level thinking. So and that's just the classical model.
Awesome. I love it. It's so cool. I always think about, because I'm seeing like the very little ones, and then thinking about where they're going to be in upper school and high school and stuff. It's just like, oh my goodness, the knowledge.
We couldn't do it in 2nd, 3rd. We couldn't do it unless you all are laying that beautiful foundation of where they are, where they are just they're acquiring those skills of being little humans, sitting in listening, all of those basic things that are starting to be human instead of being non-human, whatever that is, whatever that term is.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Okay, so piggybacking off of that, how do you incorporate, because sometimes kids come in, and I don't know how much in 4th grade, that's a little bit late, but I know sometimes kids come in where they haven't been at Cambridge, or they haven't been in a classical situation before. And so how are we thinking about like the culture of that child? They're coming in with a lot of culture of their own family, of wherever their school was before. And we even have, we have the privilege of teaching at a Christian school where, most of our families have religious background, have religious practices that kind of match up with what we're teaching, but not everybody. And so, and I know we teach a lot of students who they start off at least as like English language learners. And so they have very different culture at home than at school. How are you thinking about their culture that they're bringing into the classroom when you're writing your lessons?
And it's true. I mean, we have a lateral entries, which is really
Mhm.
who comes in lateral entries every year. And we do try to help them with that onboarding process with a summer academy, which acquaints them at least with what we are doing to give them a little bit of a heads up with regards to how we approach math. Latin is a big thing for that lateral entry. If you have had Latin since you were in the first grade, of course you're going to have more Latin ability by the time fourth grade, but it's not impossible. And it's not just the summer academy. All the summer academy does is kind of open their eyes. It just is a little bit of an exposure to it so that it's not so shocking, not such a steep on-ramp come August. But those lateral entries are coming in and they do cap it. I mean, you can't, there at some point, it's going to be too hard to acquire those new skills because the class will have already gone beyond that entry level. But fourth grade isn't that point. Fourth grade, you can come in as a lateral entry, and I have seen it from any setting, homeschooling, from the public sector, from private schools, where they have come in, and we know that. And that's like one of the things I love about teaching there. And I always say, oh, you guys have big juicy brains, because they really do have big juicy brains as far as learning that new information. And even culturally, I don't, in a way, I don't assume that they know everything as far as Christianity is concerned, because they get so much in the lower grades as far as Old Testament is concerned. So last year we had a third grade student who really had a hard time telling the difference between, oh, are we talking about Zeus or are we talking about the God of the Old Testament? Okay. It's really confusing because those two things, I mean, if you've not heard those terms before, if both of those concepts are new, you might think, well, that could be the same thing, right?
Overlap,
right.
Yeah.
And that third grader is going to be, he's going to have to work through that making those definitions narrower and so broad. And then by the time they get now I've had that fourth grade, I've had that third grade who was fourth grader, and he's perfectly fine now. He can tell you the difference. Oh, that's mythology, and this is the God of the Judeo-Christian faith. So that's that straightening out. So, but I don't assume it, but they do. They are free to ask questions, which I really love that about it. That we have a dialogue. We're not big on worksheets. We're not big on dumbing things down. We talk. I mean, I'm talking about pretty serious things throughout the Middle Ages, and any of the grades would say their subject is not juvenile. Those lateral entries, they're coming in, and it is hard work, but it's certainly not impossible. And they end the year with their class. Very, very rarely do we have a student who is not up to where the grade is by the end of the year. It may mean, and we tell parents, you need to be prepared for a little bit of a steeper on-ramp. May have to read some on your own. You may have to read those Greek myths in third grade before you come to third grade or before you get to fourth grade. So just that additional preparation.
Okay, so mostly, like most of the assistance with that happens before the school year.
Well, and I said it's just, a little, it happens. I wouldn't say most of it. I would say most of it is going to be the student learning in class. I've got two students who have not heard a lick of Latin except for back, in July. And, and it was like a fire hose of Latin. So of course they're not going to be prepared for Latin in the same way that my students who have been here since first grade, but they will catch up. And that's the great thing about it, is because it's building. It's not going to be brand new subject, next year. it'll be building on it. And they can catch up, which I think is, I think any grammar school that if you couldn't enter it at any age, that would be a problem. That would be very restrictive. You would only be able to have your current students ever.
Yeah.
Which isn't the nature of, the families and culture are in our society. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So you said you don't like to, or you don't focus on like worksheets and stuff. You do a lot of other things. So I'm a lot of people now, or I guess it's kind of common knowledge now where it's like there's multiple learning styles. Some people learn auditorily, some people learn by doing hands-on. How do you vary up your teaching to like not match those, but how do you like think about like, vary it up and like change the way you're teaching it so that maybe multiple different types can really get the information?
We as a faculty have been looking at that the myth of whether somebody is an auditory learner or a visual learner, because we're looking at children and seeing that most humans have do all of that type of learning at different junctures. So you may be an auditory learner in this subject or in this area, but you may be a visual learner so in another area. So we try not to set aside and say, oh, he's a very visual learner, because also he is only 8 years old. So there's a whole lot of developmental things that are going to happen. Their brain is big and juicy, but it's also not grown together yet. So I think that, so I don't look at it as this is going to hit the visual learners, or this is going to hit the auditory learners. I look at it as how can I engage them at their age level, and then also make them stand on tiptoes just a little bit on all of my lessons. So one of the things that I don't do is I don't repeat myself a lot. So and that is now an auditory learner is going to have a harder time, right, on something if I'm not repeating myself. But they know, oh, Mrs. Jones isn't going to repeat herself on this one, so I better pay attention. So it's the development. If you're lacking in an auditory learner, if that's a skill that you have not developed, boy, are you going to develop it, because you're going to miss out on some things, and you're going to have to ask your neighbor what Mrs. Jones just said. So I try to think about, I don't go about making a lesson that this is for the visual learners. I look at it as how I'm going to reach them. How am I going to create curiosity in this? How am I going to create carefulness? And then how am I going to make them want more? So, and that lesson is both engaging for everyone. So I try not to divvy it up, and it's because it doesn't work. That we've got some kids who are,
I agree.
So I think that more than focus on those very limiting skills, better focus on how can I evoke good questions? How can I push them a little bit further than their comfort zone as far as history goes? And how can I question them to make them think that maybe that automatic answer is not quite so correct? That's kind of how I go about approaching different learning styles.
I totally agree, and I love that, because if you look at a kid, especially early on, and go, oh, they're definitely a visual learner, I better make sure I do this. It's like, well, then they're only ever going to be a visual learner. Like they need to develop a well-rounded, I can learn from multiple different ways.
Right. I mean, that is education, right? Education is growing through your weaknesses, not growing through your strengths. You want to find what yourself, what you're weak on, and work on that, because that that if you're always successful, then what happens when you fail at something? You know, you never learn that something's difficult. Also, if you think, oh, well, she's going to put a visual thing up there for me, and then I can tune out.
Yeah.
And so much.
No.
I'm not. They all take delight in all aspects of it. I mean, hearing a story, illustrating a story. It's just. I think that it's providing a well-rounded education, not thinking of it as how can I help this visual learner, because he's not a visual learner. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so my next question for you is, how do you articulate your goals for the students, to the students, where how do they know what they're supposed to be getting out of it?
Without it being a spoiler, I do have I like the idea of literature being surprising. So our literature, I try to, and a lot of the literature the kids haven't read because it is a little bit above them. And they, for instance, Beowulf is what we start with in 10th grade. I mean, in 4th grade, and
fourth graders.
Right. And I think, when I first looked at the curriculum, when I first started teaching it, I thought, what in the world? We must be doing a children's version of Beowulf. But no, we're not. We're doing what a college class would be, or a high school class would be on Beowulf. And because it's such a classic story, and they just, it takes me 2 days, and they are begging for me not to stop reading. And I tell them, you guys have got to go to recess. Like, we've got to go. That in the sense that they don't know what my goal is in that instance for literature. But we do want to start with common language between the teacher and the student. So that's just one of the 7 laws of teaching, is just you start with that common language. And so I will go over unfamiliar words ahead of time so that they know, when we get to that, they're not getting hung up on that word. What is weird guild? Weird guild, so let's talk about what that is. The word corpse, how do you know what it, that's 2 really violent things I just mentioned for 10-year-olds, but so that I think that common language helps them get where I want them to get. So, and without that, they're not going to know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And then with history, that's the spoiler part I was going to tell you about. We have a set of illustrated history cards that are in the front of the classroom, and it does tell what subject I'm going to be introduced. And I forget because it's behind me when I'm in the front of the classroom. And so I will say, today I'm going, and they know we have just finished with barbarians. So I said, okay, we're going to talk about a system of living that is where you have people who promise service for protection. And they all go, and they're reading the card behind me, and they know we've done barbarians. So they go, it's feudalism. And so in a way, they know because it's like right there in front of them. But so that's an easy goal. They know I'm going to be talking about feudalism. But the idea of them knowing the goal, I'm not sure that they know it beforehand. I think it's more of a they can, when we're all done with it, they'll go, oh, this is why we learned this. And then they start those things together. So I can't honestly say that if I think about it, how do I know, how do they know where we're going? I'm not sure they do. And that's one of the fun things about it is just that delight of discovery,
I love it.
In science, we're getting ready to talk about electricity, and they're all so excited about electricity, but I don't think any of them know anything about electricity. So, and
just go around shocking them.
Yeah, and they so I don't know, as far as the goal, not really sure. I know the goal, but do they know the goal? No, I think that's the fun part of being 10.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna text Grace and be like, we're switching. You can do kindergarten. I'm gonna come up to 4th grade for a while.
I don't know. I think she might
she would reject. She would be like, no, you could
No.
I'm not leaving. Awesome. Okay, well, moving a little bit away from curriculum stuff, here's a hard one. And I don't like asking this question, but I'm gonna ask it.
Okay.
How would you hypothetically, and I'm sure maybe it's happened, maybe it hasn't, but how would you hypothetically deal with like an instance of intolerance in your classroom? For example, say, a bunch of the kids are ganging up on one kid because of their skin color, or because of, maybe they're a little bit slower in class. It takes them longer to get to things. So how would you kind of address that to them?
Right. We had this in last year. I had an instance where I had a student who was very curious, and he always asked, really, he asked questions. If he didn't understand anything, he would ask questions. And but he was also a bit of like a follower. He would make sure that if one of the older kids in the class, maybe one of the more mature kids in class, was wearing black trainers, that he would wear black trainers. So he was a bit of a follower. And so but those two things, being a follower but also asking questions, kind of made him be in an uncomfortable position in class. When he would ask, he would say, we would just be making, we would be conversing about something, and he'd say, for instance, he might say, well, where is Paris? And the classmates would say, well, they would turn and they would say, how can you not know where Paris is?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, and I know that's very mild bit of intolerance, but for somebody who doesn't know the world, maybe, and has never traveled before, and that turning on somebody that spend all day long with, every day with, and making them feel less than, making them feel inadequate. So my response to the class was, there are many things that you do not know. And this student he asked a question because he was brave and he didn't know where Paris was. And so he honestly had a genuine question. And there will be times that you do not know what something is. And I'm not sure if that you will have the bravery to ask and find that out. So maybe just identifying him as the one who was brave, not as the one that was less than, but the one that was brave enough to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do, within the Middle Ages, we have to talk about Islam. And we are a Christian school. So when we talk about Christianity, we talk about Christianity as not one of many religions, but a religion that requires a belief in the saving work of Christ. So Jesus is the center of our faith, and not Muhammad, not Islam. So it's not, Christianity prohibits adoption of Islam as a true religion as well. So I have to walk a narrow line, because I have students who are of Muslim faith. So that is one where I have to hold true to my faith, but I also know that this is a faith, Islam is a faith that they hold to as well. And so how do I make sure? Well, the one thing I do is that I see them in the image of God. So whatever faith they embrace, I see them in the image of God. And that image is stamped on them, no matter what they look like. And so that I have students in my class who come from more of a fundamental background and are, they would actually boo when we talked about Islam. And so, so that is something that I have to address in my class. Yeah. That, you may be thinking, and another thing, 10-year-olds all they do is parrot their parents. So, that it's not like they really hold any animosity, really genuinely. What they're doing is they're mirroring what's happening at home. And so that intolerance with regards to faith, we can talk about the trueness of Christianity, the truth in Christianity. But by doing that, we don't have to debase. We don't have to make fun of it. We don't have to think of it as evil. We're going to look at it in light of history, of what part it played in history. And so that's a tolerance that I develop within my class.
Yeah, that's a really hard. I can't, just in my own, I would have no idea what to do if I had a Muslim student and then we're talking about that and other students boo. I would have no idea, because it's just and without singling out the student of hey, class, we can't do that because so and so is it's no, I'm not singling them out. I'm trying to teach this is a space where we're looking at the truth, but we're
learning. Yeah, we're learning, and there are they, and so it is, because I am teaching about the church through the Middle Ages. That is the ribbon that runs through the whole thing. So it's a delicate subject, as do when we get to the Reformation. I have students that are in the Roman Catholic tradition, mm-hmm. and now we're talking about reformers coming along and calling that Catholic Church not the true church. And so how do I've had that with Mormon children that are of faith. And how do we, I have a student who said, what you're talking about when you talk about the Nicene Creed, or when you talk about the Pelagian heresy about Jesus being both God and man, the heresy is saying that he was not God and man, fully God and fully man. When you have a Mormon student say, we don't believe that about Jesus. And I said, I know you do. So that does require me to be familiar with, I need to know what Islam is. I mean, they teach it. We do a whole thing on Islam. And I need to know, why is Mormonism not considered part of Christendom? So anyway, that is, and being sensitive to that student and not making them feel they did not decide to be Roman Catholic. They did not decide. They're 8, 9, 10 years old. Yeah. And so that it's a different discussion when you enter the rhetoric school, but in the grammar school, that needs to be part of education. And it needs to be, and there does need to be tolerance.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. I said I was only going to hold you here for half an hour, so I'm going to stay true to that. One last question.
And I'd be glad to answer your questions, Rowan, whatever you want. I mean, and I feel like I got on my soapbox, so.
No, it's such good stuff, though. It's filling up my big juicy brain. I love talking with you. Let's go to, so we had the privilege of being open last year. So we only did a little bit of online, real online learning when we first got shut down. But what were some things that you had to learn from that experience that like, how has that changed the way you teach, or has it? And if so, like, what are some things that you would take into the classroom, be like, oh, I found this, great website, I want to use it, or what are just, how has that changed your experience?
Well, we did from March to the end of the school year, right? That, not last year, but the year before that, we closed up that. And then we started last year. I had 5 students that were distance learners. So I did a trimester of,
That's right.
all the way with those 5 students.
I forgot about that. I had 2 students. I totally forgot about that.
I would have liked to forget about it because it was very hard. But those students did not feel comfortable coming back to school. And so we had made a commitment to those families that we would go to the end of the first trimester with them, and to get them on track with that. So that was real hard, because a student can't spend 7 hours in front of a screen like they can be in my classroom. So I had to be real efficient with my time. Also, another thing that I had to learn was what sources I could use that spoke to my topics, the Magna Carta, for instance, at a 10-year-old level, because they were doing so much self-teaching. They get so much out of what they were reading. And I'm quite proud of myself, because I fall into the generation that's not tech savvy, but I feel like I navigated Schoology. I navigated the use of Zoom, and making sure that my mic was when I wanted to talk. But it was, communication was so hard in that, and that's why I'm just so thankful every day. I'm thankful that we're on campus, because those students, they relied on me to supply materials through Schoology, through our learning platform, and them having to access that. And one of the things that I really liked when we were all together Zooming, in that springtime where we were all online, was the use of polls.
Okay.
In Zoom, and I would set it up beforehand, and I wouldn't overuse it because they loved it so much. I wanted to keep it as something special, but they absolutely loved. And I'm not sure to this day why a poll is so fun, but I like doing a poll. And then I would share the results with them, and they would see how 70% of the class got this question right, and 90% got this. Yeah, and it was, and I was cheering right along with them. So that was use of polls, 100%. I just think humans like polls. I don't know why. Maybe it's because there's the lack of you're anonymous. So I think that's okay, and that's okay, because I didn't need to know. They need to know who didn't know. They needed to know if they knew the answer or not. That's all and it's very telling. So I even do polls now. I just don't do them on my computer. So in my classroom, we're going to do a poll tomorrow morning. So and I'm going to collect put how many of them got correct, and it's anonymous, and it's low stakes. So yeah. I just that's something that was fun. And then the last thing for as far as technology goes, was the recording the lesson. Was I could record a science lesson. It's not anywhere near to them doing the hands-on experiment that we do, because we do a lot of hands-on stuff in 4th grade. Not in 3rd grade, they do a lot of demo, but in 4th grade, they actually get to touch the stuff, and they're like so excited because they get to do it. But I had to record a lesson, and I found out that I really enjoyed recording the lesson and showing them, and I had to make sure that I couldn't go on and on. It was like 10 minutes most. And so I had to learn how to condense down that science lesson so they were still seeing it, but and getting the point, getting the concept, whatever it is, induced magnetism or whatever it was. So those were the 3 things I think I took away as being positive things about distance learning.
Okay, it's okay that if there weren't many, I totally understand.
It was real hard. Oh, one more thing as far as technology goes is I learned how to sync my DocuCam to my Zoom lesson, and that I could do the work on the I could diagram a sentence, and they could see me in real time doing that diagramming sentences, even though they had to show me their boards and backwards, but they could see me diagramming. So that was a game changer, to use the DocuCam with the Zoom lesson.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, real last question. This is just last question. Favorite part about teaching? What's your favorite part of the day when you come in for a lesson?
Oh gosh.
It's actually the hardest question.
It is, because I love teaching 4th grade. I can't imagine teaching any other grade. I don't really want to teach any other grade. Oh man. We start every day with a poem, and I read them a poem. And sometimes they're poems that rhyme, sometimes they're modern poems, sometimes they're funny poems, sometimes they're sad poems, because that's what life is about, all of those emotions. And sometimes when I read them the poem, they might applaud afterwards. So I don't know if that just appeals to my vanity or what, but that's one of, and I didn't write the poem, I just read it. That, and where I guess one of my favorite things is that when I know that I'm getting near the end of the lesson and it's going to be a cliffhanger, and I pause for that beautiful pause, and I'll say, until next time. And they're like, stop there. That story grip. I love it. Can't beat it.
Awesome. That is great. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I wish I could see you teach. I want to come, maybe if I have a moment.
Well, come on up.
I'll come up and see you guys.
Absolutely. You're welcome anytime. There's a little padded bench in the back. Make yourself comfortable.
Awesome. I would love to come see you teach.
We would get to practice our French greeting, which really is not great right now. So
I'm going to tell Leslie, like, hey, she needs to practice her French. Ask her to do it in French next time.
I think we've had a visitor every day since the beginning of school. So, but we're still kind of stinky at it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a blessing to talk to you. Like, seriously, I love you. You're so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been my delight. I hope your class is just a major success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see. We'll see. All right.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to end the recording and then we'll be good. So thank you so much.